find it very helpful. And just to point out, we are very specifically talking about updates and things that are happening at the Arlington Asylum Office right now. So this is going to be specific to procedures, and what we're seeing at the Arlington Asylum Office is not necessarily what's happening at other asylum offices. And in fact, a lot of what we're seeing is not. We know it's not happening at other offices. But these are some important details to be aware of. Changes have been happening pretty rapidly, and we'll cover those today. And then also, because of the recent changes for asylees, due to the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, we will also cover some of those details as well, including fees that could impact asylum seekers. And we also have just sort of a short heads up about how public benefits and medical benefits, things like that, may also change going forward for asylees. So we will get started. Um, some of the good news is that a lot of interviews have been scheduled from the backlog. And new cases, especially if they're filed online versus by paper, the online cases are getting interviews scheduled within 6 weeks. So all of my clients who filed in 2016 and whose cases are before the Arlington Asylum Office have all been interviewed. Those cases have all been cleared out. And now they're scheduling interviews for early 2017. I got an interview notice for someone who filed in March of 2017, and it looks like they're working on that early spring 2017 section of the backlog right now. So, with that news, it is very important for people who have just sort of left their case to the side, haven't been working on it, to make sure that you are ready to go. You need to have all of your affidavits, all of your evidence, everything prepared and ready to submit, because you're not going to be given an extension or a new date, which was pretty customary before. So, um, if you haven't been in touch with your lawyer in a while, I would encourage you to check in with them and make sure everything is prepared and ready to go, because whether it's your delay or your attorney's delay, the asylum office is not accepting many reasons for reschedule, which we'll talk about a little more. But just to emphasize, if you filed in 2016 or 2017, get ready because your interview may be coming up. And with the all of the interviews being scheduled, a lot of people had just become very comfortable with the fact that their interview was not going to be scheduled. So a lot of people were not prepared. And therefore, once these interview notices started going out, a lot of people couldn't meet the evidence deadline. So they were asking for a request to reschedule. And until just a couple of months ago, it continues to be a stated national policy that the first request to reschedule will generally be honored. But the Arlington Asylum Office is no longer following that national policy. And most requests to reschedule are being denied or not even responded to. And this is happening even in situations where there are severe medical issues, where the attorney has another hearing in court that they cannot change. People who are going to be out of town. There's really a lot of due process issues going on behind the Arlington Asylum Office's refusal to reschedule under most circumstances. But in the meantime, we have to deal with it. And that means you need to be prepared. Or if you ask to reschedule and they don't approve it, you may show up at your interview and not be prepared. They may exclude your evidence, or they may just refer the case to court. There's actually been quite a few instances where people including attorneys, have filed a request to reschedule. It wasn't responded to, so they showed up on the day of the interview and said, "Hey, we're here, but we need to reschedule this case." And then they're given a notice of failure to appear, and then the case is being referred to court, even though they were actually there on the day of the interview. So there's some pretty severe consequences for folks who are trying to reschedule right now. Also, previously, we could submit them by email, the request to reschedule by email, which seemed easy and efficient. However, the Arlington Asylum Office has changed their mode of receiving these requests. You can only submit them by mail now. Um, and uh, you can try to follow up by email, but generally they're going to be responding by mail to these requests. The positive side, after many years of advocacy of asking them to please give us more heads up before the interview date, they have finally instituted an approximately 5 to 6 week notice before the interview. So previously we only got a 3 week notice, and the notice itself was issued 3 weeks before the interview day. And so you probably didn't get the notice for another 4 days, 5 days. So you really had very little time to meet that evidence filing deadline. But now with the greater period of notice, that's been a very welcome change, and hopefully helps you to be prepared as well. Um, how you submit your evidence once your interview is scheduled has also changed. So since the COVID pandemic began, the Arlington Asylum Office and all other asylum offices allowed us to submit your final evidence package by email and then bring that hard copy to the interview. And a few months ago, the Arlington Asylum Office decided they were no longer going to accept these submissions by email. They had to be filed by mail only if you have a paper filed case. And of course, that evidence deadline is 7 days before your scheduled interview date. If your case is an electronically filed case through MyUSCIS, then your evidence has to be submitted to them through MyUSCIS. That's actually much easier than having to deal with the mail. For attorneys or other legal representatives joining the call, an important tip is to take an extra copy of the documents that you filed if it was by mail, because in a lot of situations we're showing up and the evidence, even though we have proof that it was received by the deadline, it's not actually in the file, so the officer hasn't reviewed it. And in these cases, well, in all cases, I take an extra copy in case the officer says they don't have it, it didn't make it to the file, and then just sort of gently encourage them to review it briefly, so that the interview can continue on that day. So another very recent change was that as of July, all residents of Maryland should be scheduled for their asylum interview at the USCIS Baltimore field office. The Arlington Asylum Office had already outgrown its office space in Arlington. And for about a year, they were actually working on a new office space in Shirlington. And they were expecting to move their full office there. However, once the new administration came in, they stopped a lot of new leases and things like that from going forward. So this change in location for Maryland residents is related to that. That way, hopefully things won't be as crowded. It's been pretty wild for a few months at the Arlington office. Hopefully we'll see sort of less crowds there, especially with the Maryland residents going to the Baltimore field office. And check-in there should be quite similar. It's still the Arlington Asylum Office officers who are going there in person to conduct the interviews. and the decision process, things like that, may be a little different. So most interviews at the Arlington Asylum Office are being given a date to return to pick up their decision in person. But if you're interviewed at the Baltimore office, you're most likely going to have your decision mailed out. Um, Other sort of issues, just to highlight, to give context to what we're seeing. Um, as of this month, the officers at the Arlington Asylum Office are being assigned the case the morning of the interview. So this is something they're trying out. Over the last few months, there have been many interviews rescheduled day of. And it's because, in part, due to officers calling out for the day. So workloads have to be shifted. They may or may not have coverage. And so this change is their at least one attempt to try to deal with those call outs and to try to have officers available for the interview scheduled. So officers will be receiving your case the morning of, hopefully, if it's in their file, and therefore will probably not be as prepared for your case as they would have been in the past. But it was really hit or miss before anyways, if they had actually reviewed it much beforehand. So I don't know that from the adjudication side if we'll really see an impact from this, but hopefully it helps for day of rescheduling going forward. So even though they were denying pretty much all requests to reschedule because of attorney availability or the applicant's availability, and we were still having to show up. The asylum office, on the other hand, after applicants and their attorneys wait for hours, were coming out and canceling those same interviews, or any interview, whether you had scheduled, whether you had made a request to reschedule or not. Some days as many as 10 cases were being sent home. And we've also seen some people whose cases have been rescheduled like 3 times the day of, people who have come for their interview, told they didn't have an officer, they come back for another day, same thing 3 times. So I'm really hoping that this shift to officers being assigned the morning of will help alleviate that. Um, and it's also just been a very busy place. So part of the reason that so many cases are being scheduled right now is because officers who used to be assigned to adjudicating border cases, they no longer really have border cases to adjudicate. So now they're all on the affirmative portfolio. So there's a lot more officers available, a lot more interviews can be scheduled, and therefore the waiting room of the asylum office, the lobby, everything is just full. And some days when you get there in the mornings, you may have to wait in the lobby downstairs. I even had clients told to wait outside until I arrived. So there's been a lot of adjustments trying to deal with just how busy it is right now. Another major change that just recently happened is how you can submit inquiries. So many of you probably know for, I mean, a decade, you could walk in and submit your inquiry in person and ask about your case. And although they had in the last few years limited that to certain days, you could still walk in, make an inquiry. Now you can no longer walk in to make inquiries without an appointment. You can email czar to ask for an appointment to come in person, but I'm not aware of them approving that. I've made a few requests myself and just haven't even received a response or a date or anything to make that in-person inquiry. So for now, you can email them. You can also submit them by mail, but at least they're still accepting the inquiries by email. They may be shifting to a system where you can go online and actually schedule the appointment to come in. They piloted this before COVID, and it actually worked out quite well. They were the only asylum office who had this option, but that was stopped once the pandemic started, never came back, and now they're looking at relaunching that. So I'm not sure when or if they will. If they do, it should be on their website. So keep checking there, if you're wanting and needing to make an in-person inquiry. Also, how people receive decisions has changed. For many years, people would just receive their decision in the mail. Now, the Arlington Asylum Office, if you're interviewed at the Arlington Asylum Office, most people are going to be given a day to come back. For a few months, we were given that date of return immediately when the interview ended. So the officer would give you a notice. This is your date to return to pick up your decision. But I guess the officers were not able to meet that deadline in a lot of cases. So now they tell you you will receive a notice in the mail that includes your date to return to the asylum office. I think this is a little problematic because the mail is not entirely reliable. So this presents another opportunity for the applicant to not be notified of a really important step in their case. But hopefully, if you're represented, your representative's going to get the notice, you're going to get the notice. And so there's that sort of safety net. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, for folks who are interviewed at the Baltimore field office, they're treating that as what we call a circuit ride. And in those cases will be mailed, should be mailed their decision. At least that's what I was told by leadership as of just a couple of weeks ago. All right, so change of address. This is another positive change. Before they added the option to update your address online, then when you submitted a change of address form, it was up to USCIS to update multiple different systems to make sure your address was up to date everywhere that it needed to be updated. This new system is supposed to automatically update your address across all of their systems and is a much easier process than having to prepare the form, submit it, notify multiple agencies. If, however, you don't get the confirmation or your legal representative doesn't get the confirmation in their account that it was updated, then I recommend that you do still complete the AR11 form and at least send it to the asylum office to make sure they're aware of your change of address. And I had to do this the other day. I think especially for paper filed cases, it's about 50-50 as the attorney, the ones that they are actually processing for me and not. But if I send the signed AR11, then they'll update it. So things are constantly changing, and unfortunately, it's not just impacting the applicants and the attorneys, but it's impacting the staff a lot as well. There's, expressed discontent with how things are going. Their caseloads are very high. They're expected to do at least 8 cases a week. And the constant changes impact them as well in terms of how they review cases, when they review cases, what cases are being assigned. So that adds to sort of the chaos at the office right now. One thing that I wanted to flag for asylum seekers, I don't want to be an alarmist or scare anyone, but I do want asylum seekers to be aware of this possibility. The administration did announce the intent to start detaining more people for overstaying their visas. And just because you have a pending asylum application and it says you can remain in the United States while your application is pending and you're given a work permit, that does not protect you from being detained. So we may start seeing more of those detentions in our area. I've heard of a couple. I haven't heard of a lot to be alarmed quite yet, but it is definitely happening. So there are, a few steps to take that I think just to be prepared. I think memorizing your attorney's phone number is really important in case you are detained, and you can try to contact your attorney immediately. Asking for that permission. Don't expect that they're going to say, you have the right to call your attorney. Just ask repeatedly from the time you're detained. I would like to call my attorney. I would like to call my attorney. Um, and also be ready, like have a savings account if you can, because since if you entered on a visa, then you should have at least the right to a bond proceeding. So one, there's going to be legal fees involved, and there may be also a bond that you need to pay. And then once released from detention, or even if you're kept in detention, then you're going to be fighting your case from immigration court, because the asylum office will lose jurisdiction. And generally, there's going to be more fees involved in a court case versus an asylum case, an affirmative case before the asylum office. Um, Also, I want to take a moment here, while we don't have time to dive into it, because these detentions are expected to increase. Reviewing the Know Your Rights materials out there, the ACLU has some excellent videos and pointers. Um, a lot of organizations do. And, just because you have a work permit doesn't necessarily mean that you should start like immediately providing information. Um, it may be important, depending on the context, for you to remain silent. And also, just because there's a knock at your door doesn't mean you have to answer it, just because it's an ICE agent or an immigration agent. Or a lot of times they're just in plain clothes, but they're wearing a mask. That doesn't mean you have to open your door. If they have an arrest warrant for you, then they'll ultimately find you. But if they're just coming because of an immigration warrant, then you can, refuse to open your door, and just try to prevent that detention. And in quite a few situations where communities are coming in and preventing ICE from detaining the people, or the person is not opening the door, they move on to the next person. So, hopefully that would happen if you're able to um, avoid that detention. So, other good news is that we are still seeing a lot of approvals for eligible cases. Um, so far in my practice, I have not seen a change at all in the approval ratings. I do know there's a lot of new officers. I have certainly heard from many colleagues of situations where really meritorious cases have been referred. But that's always been an issue. Asylum officers get 6 weeks of training, and this is a very complicated area of law. And they don't always get it right. So, so far, I'm optimistic that at least we're still in a period where a lot of cases are still being approved, and it's not just, a referral to court. So, unfortunately, the big, beautiful bill, or big bad bill, that passed recently did have a lot of impact on asylum seekers. And while there is a lot in the bill that we can't cover, I just wanted to highlight a few different areas where asylum seekers or asylees will see and or feel the impacts of this bill. So a few of the things we're going to cover: the application filing fee for the I-589, the pending fee for the I-589, the additional fees now for the work permit application. There's also immigration court fees that we'll touch on. And then also, just to give everyone a heads up, that access to federal health and social support has also been impacted pretty significantly. So for people who are filing new applications, the filing fee, we've never had a filing fee for asylum cases before. It's going to be $100 going forward. And that amount may increase later on, but for now, that's what they will be charging. This fee is not waivable. So for a lot of application fees, you can file for a waiver based on your income. However, it's not possible here. It's a mandatory fee, and it applies for cases that are being filed now, in the future, and will be required at the time of filing. And no clear guidance right now on like how or who to pay. I haven't filed an online application since July 22nd, so I don't know if the system is already set up for you to pay it. But we should be seeing that anytime now. Also, a very big change is that applications that are pending for more than a year are going to have to pay $100 a year because the government has not yet gotten to your case. Again, this fee is not waivable. It's going to have to be paid annually, and this is going to apply for cases that were filed before this new law was enacted, as well as new cases going forward. Um, so we don't know a lot about how this is going to be implemented, but one of the things that they have shared is that for the first time, like the first time this payment is due, you're going to be sent a notice. So each and every applicant should receive a notice about what is required. Because this notice is going out, again, very important to have your address updated. And I don't know what's going to happen if you don't get the notice because it's lost in the mail. I don't have many answers right now. But these notice should include how much is due, when, and how to pay, and then the consequences of failure to pay. I don't know what those consequences are yet, so that's still yet to be shared as far as I'm aware. So again, this is going to apply to everyone, even if you filed your case well before this new law went into effect. So once it is operating, then they'll notify people who need to pay going forward, and again, provide that information to you. Another fee that has, in the entire time I've been practicing, never been required. I don't think it's ever been required for first-time asylum applicants, or asylum applicants for their first time applying for their work permit. It's always been $0. Going forward, there is a $550 fee. Again, because of the new law, it is not waivable, and you're going to have to pay for that at the time of filing. Also, for renewals, the filing fee, the USCIS filing fees, are now just one part of the fee. You have an additional fee that has to be paid to a different place by a different separate check or separate credit card authorization, and that should be in effect now. So also, they made it very clear in this new bill that if your asylum is denied by the immigration judge, or by asylum officer, and I'll explain this difference in a minute, but once you have a final denial on your asylum case, then even if you have another year left on your work permit, according to the date, it's going to be terminated. So in the past, even when you were denied a benefit, if you had the work permit and it had a validity period, it was still presumably good. But now going forward is going to terminate. So if, for example, you're still in status when the asylum office makes a decision on your case, then they can't refer your case to court, so you don't get that automatic second review. And if it's denied, that's their final decision, and that's when your work permit would be terminated. Whereas if you are not in status when they decide to deny your case, then they have to refer it to court, and that application is considered to be still pending. So it doesn't terminate there. And then only if the case is denied, if you do not appeal within the 30 days, then it will be terminated after that. There are also fees in court. So a few just to mention, if you are filing your application in court. I think this is for the first time. Like let's say you were put into removal proceedings, not referred from the immigration court, but if you're just initially in removal proceedings and you submit your application, then you're going to pay that $100. For referred cases, I don't think there's an additional fee there, but I'm not 100% clear on that yet. But for as long as the application is pending, again, even before the immigration court, there is going to be this annual asylum fee for all cases. There are other fees in court that were implemented that were pretty substantial changes. Really high fees if you're filing an adjustment of application in court, motion to reopen, appeals to the BIA, things like that. All those fees have increased. And then unfortunately, one of the more cruel impacts of this bill is how or who is now eligible for public benefits. And the definition, or not the definition, the term used for someone who is eligible has been changed from qualified immigrants to eligible aliens. And they only included three groups of people in this definition. So those who are lawful permanent residents, so LPRs, meaning you have your green card, Cuban and Haitian entrants, and residents under the Compact of Free Association. I don't actually know what that is. And while asylum applicants weren't generally eligible for the federal public benefits before, asylees were. So this is a really big change. I want to mention here, though, that asylees and refugees have had benefits available to them through the Office of Refugee Resettlement within their first year of asylee status. And it's not clear right now. I don't know. I didn't hear back from colleagues if anyone did know how the Big Beautiful Bill impacts those ORR benefits. My assistant Isabel, she did some digging and she doesn't think that the way it's worded, and because it amends the Social Security Act, she doesn't think it's going to impact the ORR benefits, but we're totally just guessing right now. So in general, outside of the ORR benefits, what we do know is that asylees are no longer going to be eligible for these programs, Medicaid, CHIP, Medicare, SNAP, and even premium tax credits under the ACA, which means that if you got your health insurance through the marketplace, you will be receiving a notice from your insurance company, if you haven't already, notifying you that your policy is going to have to be canceled. I know people with DACA who have already been notified that they're no longer eligible for their health insurance because it was obtained through the marketplace. So that doesn't mean you're not going to be eligible for health insurance at all. Insurance companies still provide policies, and you would want to make sure it's still ACA compliant, because that means they have to cover like prior issues. But the policy just can't be purchased through the marketplace, and therefore you're not going to be eligible for a subsidized premium, things like that. They've also expanded what are considered federal public benefits, I guess pursuant to the Social Security Act and the Big Beautiful Bill. Health clinics are going to be impacted, block grants, recovery programs, and a lot of other things. I'm not sure exactly when all of these will go into effect or who exactly it's going to impact, but just highlighting these upcoming changes. So there's also different periods of time when all of these changes go into effect. And some depend on, when you started receiving the benefit, when it's set to expire. There's a lot of different moving parts here. So unfortunately, I only have very general information for you right now. At least for Medicare, though, you should be notified by the Office of Social Security when your benefits will be terminated. Um, and then just a few key takeaways based on what we've gone over today. So, just be aware that there are now additional filing fees every year that your asylum application is pending. If you haven't filed yet, you will be expected to pay the $100, and then every year after that, the $100. And then for those of you who have your applications pending, just be on the lookout for this notice of when you need to pay. And you can always check the fee schedule because we don't know if this is going to increase or when. So for every single application that I file, no matter if I filed one the day before, I go to the website, whether it's for the green card application or work permit application. I check the date of the form to make sure they didn't change the form on me since yesterday. And then also check the fee to make sure you're filing it with the right amount. And then the last piece is that unless you are a green card holder, access to many federal programs related to health and well-being are going to be restricted going forward. And again, just to emphasize here, I don't know yet how that impacts those benefits that have been provided by the Office of Refugee Resettlement, because that is provided for in a separate regulation altogether. And it doesn't appear that the big beautiful bill incorporated or changed that language. So hopefully there's at least that safety net for folks who are, just receiving their status. So, I'm happy to take questions. I know that
Yeah.
sometimes you guys need to change the recording for questions, so I'll let you direct that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Especially you've been mentioning that people who have a visa overstay have the risk of being detained, right? So you also mentioned that it is very important to memorize the phone number of their lawyer. That's very important reminder. And also, I just want to add also, like, especially those people who have a family, children, spouses, and just to have a family safety plan is also very important. So we have a very good package of family safety plan. So you can reach out to your case managers and they can help you having that plan ahead of time. It's good to hear that many people are getting approval, but I want to ask you one question, which I usually receive from clients, and I will pass it to other people. So, do we have any like changes in a court referral process, changes to the standard procedure when they refer to immigration court? And also, we have a client who recently referred to immigration court, and she was told to fill out I-589 as a new, and also she has to pay $100 fee. So is it something new? Thank you.
Okay. Um, so in terms of the change in the standard procedure for referring to immigration court, I'm not aware of any changes there. Um, for the case for the person who is required to fill out a new asylum application and pay the fee, one, the courts right now don't know what's going on. Like this change has been thrown on them, and different judges, even within the same court, are doing different things. So I don't know where this is going to land. As a legal issue, requiring someone to file a new I-589 many years after they filed their first one is not a correct practice. I'm 100% sure about that. Maybe the court is doing it just in a way to try to force that initial $100 fee once the case is before them. And I'll ask our court like liaison teams to ask about this and try to clarify, but I don't think that should be happening. And I hope we don't see that going forward. And one thing that I did want to mention, so far we haven't seen major changes or many major changes in who is protected for asylum purposes, except we did have a major or a Board of Immigration Appeals case that is now trying to basically reduce eligibility for people who are victims of gender-based persecution. So those cases are going to become much more complex going forward. I think FGM cases are still going to be very strong because we can use ethnicity and some other qualifying factors there, not just gender and nationality. But if it is a case that's based primarily on domestic violence, for example, those are going to be a lot more difficult going forward.
Thank you. So I'm gonna stop recording and so if you have any question, it's the time to ask Lindsay. Thank you.